So I've got Dr. Bryce here, who I will introduce. So Dr. Bryce Fleming is here as our wellness speaker. As everyone knows, this week is Amadeus Wellness Week. So Dr. Bryce Fleming is an Amazon bestselling wellness co-author. He is a TEDx presenter, holistic health practitioner, and a loving father of two beautiful children. As a director of Alignment Health Network, he's also a director, of Alignment Health Network, a free service that connects corporate team members with the right health and wellness practitioners. Bryce's passion for helping people achieve their full potential and equipping them with the necessary tools to lead empowered lives truly sets him apart. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to.
Thank you, Natasha. That sounds very pre-written. So sorry about that. So first of all, for those of you online, hi, welcome. I apologise in advance because I do tend to walk around a bit, so hopefully I'll stay in screen. So if I keep heading off, hopefully you can still hear me. But look, it is an honour and a privilege to be here today and be able to share this information with you. This information that I'm going to present is pretty much, I suppose, the last 20 years of my life trying to figure out really what are the things that we can do to help ourselves to not only reduce stress, but really ask very good questions to be the best versions that we can be. Before we kind of get stuck into that, is it fair to say that we are getting more stressed, more overwhelmed, bombarded with things? We get this constant kind of like brain fog starting to develop, this worry, this anxiety. We tend to be getting a little bit sicker than what we were. Is that fair? Are we noticing this generally amongst us? Yeah. And I think the challenges is the patterns that we have and the stresses that we have to deal with, they keep compiling, right? So, I mean, if you think about your normal day, you'll get out of bed the same side every morning. You walk the same number of steps to the bathroom. You brush your teeth the same number of times with the same hand. You look in the mirror for the same amount of time to figure out who you are. You walk downstairs or into another room and you eat the same breakfast and you see the same people that push the same emotional buttons. Sounding true? You commute the same amount of time in the same car, in the same seat. You come and sit in front of the same computer usually, and there's a lot of patterning that tends to happen. And we accumulate these physical, chemical, and emotional stresses. And really what the issue is and the challenge is that the more we keep adding on to us, the harder it is to deal with these things. And so what we tend to do a lot of the time is we have all these strategies in place to try and reduce the stress load after the events have happened. Okay, so you might have heard a bit about like our breath work that's going around on social media at the moment, and there's obviously yoga which you're doing, there's ice baths that are becoming a big thing if anyone's seen that online, there's pills, there's potions, there's lotions, there's gadgets, there's gizmos, there's everything you can think of that's coming out now to help people try and reduce the stress, because we don't know how to actually navigate through the stress and neutralize it before it becomes a problem. And that's really what today is all about. So I want to share this information and put into your mind some strategies so that rather than compiling on more and then trying to deal with it later, you might have some tools in place to be able to neutralize it so that you don't have to treat the symptoms rather than get to the cause. Does that sound fair? Cool. Before I get into that, maybe I need to share a little bit about my story and how I got to this point in my life, because learning about stress and figuring out what that does to the body was actually a very important part of my journey. So from the age of 16, well, I was actually quite unwell as a child. So I was about 110 kilos at my heaviest. Yeah, I know there's a few shocked looks. Yeah, I know. I had very low energy. I was very weak, and this is from about 16 was probably the worst time that I started coming into these problems. Around the time when hormones are trying to run wild, and mine were just running all over the shop in totally different directions. I was, very weak in terms of muscular strength. As I said, very low energy. I had like skin issues, and so really I wasn't having a great time in life. And when you're at school and you're 16, all you really want to do is just fit in. right? You just want to be like the regular kids and just do what regular kids stuff that everyone does. And, you know, for me, it was a real struggle even participating in sports or, you know, getting changed in the locker rooms and things like that were really quite confronting. And so I went to some experts and endocrinologists and people that really tried to help. And these were very loving, kind people. And they said, look, we think there's something wrong with you. Perhaps you might have a brain tumor. And so I was put in a MRI machine. You know those big machines that make the big clunky noises? Yeah. So I was putting in there, and I remember just kind of looking up at this machine going, oh, geez, you know, what happens if I have a brain tumor? And all these thoughts going through my mind, quite confronting as a child, right? They did the scans and they couldn't find anything physically wrong. But the solution I got given at the time was, look, we don't know what's wrong with you. You're showing all these signs and symptoms of what's called Cushing's syndrome, where your body's producing way too much stress hormones and not enough of the growth and development hormones that you need. But the solution I'm going to give you is to take this needle and stick it in your butt every couple of weeks for however long it takes. And so, first of all, I was like a big wuss and I don't like the thought of needles. So that didn't really appeal to me very much. But at that time, I didn't realize it at the time, but this really was a pivotal moment for me because I suppose, then had to go on a journey because I said, look, I thank you so much. Thank you, but no, thank you. I think there's another way, you know, and imagine as a 16-year-old kid with, you know, these really caring health experts that had the tools that they have to try and tell you this is what you need to do. And I just said, no, I'm out. I'm going to figure it out. And so that's what I started to do. And so I went through and experimented with my health for years. At the time, you know, around that stage, we had all these kind of like low-fat diets that were out. Do you remember those? And then they realized that that was a big mistake and that killed a whole bunch of people. So we reversed that. And remember when they said eggs are bad and then they said eggs are good again? And so you'll see this flip-flop pretty much every decade of information, depending on the science at the time. Actually, it was only about 50 or so years ago, we were spraying our kids with DDT, you know, like to thinking that we were trying to protect them. And we realized, nope, that's harming them. And so, you know, I suppose my experiments and my journeys were really based on the information that was there at the time, which was a lot of low-fat kind of foods and lots of exercise and all sorts of stuff. And so my journey fluctuated. My challenges, along with obviously my physical health, I had a lot of challenges with mental health too. So reading and writing was very challenging for me. Actually, it still is today. Yeah, learning capabilities and fitting into school was a real challenge for me as well. And so I got out of school, experimented for many years, couldn't quite get into university because I didn't have the marks. I only got 50, I think, in my HSC, which was a real struggle at the time to get into university. I took a year off and I started doing some work in animation to draw. And I worked on a couple of cartoons, one called Crockadoo. Does anyone remember that? Is anyone old enough? As I can see a couple of grins. Another one called The Magic Pudding. Okay, and I didn't know this at the time, but these were animal characters pretending to be human. And this was actually part of the solution that I needed, but I just didn't have the information to kind of put all the pieces together. So maybe that was divine intervention, I'm not sure. Moving forward, still experimenting with my health, and so my weight fluctuated, my energy levels were bouncing up and down. I couldn't quite normalize things, but I saw some changes in my own body going through this experimental stuff that I was doing. But then I got a year out of animation. I realized I needed to learn more about health. I needed to get this in my head. So I went to Macquarie University and I pleaded with them. I said, I need to get into university. And they said, you can do an arts degree. And I said, fine, let's do an arts degree. And so I got in and I started doing about 1.5 years of arts degree. And then from there, I had one person that shifted the trajectory of my course in my life, which is, again, some of the information I'm going to share with you. It was a friend of mine who was studying a health science. He snuck me into a lecture hall. So anyone who's been to Macquarie University may remember something like this. I was actually sitting at the back at the time when he snuck me into this lecture for one of his health subjects. And there was one man by the name of Dr. John Kelly, who said one thing that shifted my whole paradigm. And that was that the body is self-healing and self-regulating. You don't need things from the outside in, you just need to put in the right ingredients so you can get well from the inside out. This was a game changer because up until that point in time, I got told that there's something wrong with me. I need things to fix me. Whereas I had a person up in front of me going, hey, it's the other way around. It's inside out, not outside in. And then I kind of thought about this. And a great way to really describe this is we look at nature and all living things on the planet. Watch this, ready? If I get a plant and that plant starts to wilt, what would you do? Who can tell me? Water? Great. Why don't we say drugs? Or supplements? Or surgery? Would it make sense to label the symptoms that the plant has, like brown leafitis or wiltaxia, come up with a diagnosis and then give a treatment for it? Or would it make more sense to go, well, it has certain things, doesn't it, that it needs? It needs water, it needs sunlight, it needs soil. And we can treat those things at the time, but if it's not getting the right ingredients, it's still going to be sick. Does that make sense? Yeah, and we can apply that to every living thing on the planet. That logic is there. We all have what's called a genome, or I suppose a recipe book inside of us that requires certain things. Genes are like, as I said, recipes. So if you've got just say a meal to be produced, you need to put in the right ingredients, otherwise it's not going to produce the right meal, correct? And genes in humans and genes in plants and genes in animals, they all work the same way. You need to put in certain things. So this got me onto something that really inspired me, because I went through this stage where I'm like, right, I need to learn. So I figured out how to actually learn properly. And then within 6 months, I managed to change from my arts degree to a health sciences degree. And that's where I became more and more in depth and ingrained into trying to understand this information from a different paradigm than what we mostly get taught. I graduated, I started going into practice, but I was a junkie when it came to trying to learn. I started doing seminars after seminar after seminar. I found that even though I couldn't read and write very well because I had some learning problems, I could hear and visualize, and so I could absorb things very well like that. And I remember going to a seminar a bit like this with probably a lot more people in it at the stage, with the name, presented by the name of Dr. James Chestnut. And he said one thing that was pivotal. Okay, so there's a few aha moments through this journey, and you'll understand why this is important in a second. But he said that we are humans and humans are animals. And I'm like, well, man, come on, we all know that. But the challenge is that we've somehow disassociated ourselves from all the other animals in the animal kingdom, and somehow the rules don't seem to want to apply to us. I mean, we'll walk into a restaurant and there'll be a sign up saying no animals allowed, but there's a bunch of humans that are eating there. And then you'll kind of have this belief system that's ingrained into us, and you'll allow your child to sit on the couch playing Xbox, eating potato chips, but you'll take the dog for a walk, but leave the kid there. In fact, in Kentucky, there was a case where this actually happened, and the dog got taken away because it was inhumane, but the child was, unhealthy and obese, but no one even batted an eyelid. And so it's this belief system that kind of is ingrained into us that creates a lot of the challenges that we face today. So that made me think about things a little clearer and about how we can reduce the stress in the human species. Think of it like this, ready? If I got a monkey and I was to pick that monkey up out of its natural environment where it swings from trees and eats bananas and does monkey stuff, throws poop at other monkeys and I don't know, whatever monkeys do, right? And I was to pick it up and put it into this environment, would it get healthier or sicker? Sicker? If I was to do that 10 times, what would the outcome be? Probably 10 sick monkeys, right? And so again, the solution that we have currently in place is go, right, well, monkeys in captivity, we're going to treat the problems, right? Treat the symptoms that you have. Whereas the question might need to really be, well, why don't we just kind of do what those guys are doing over there and see what happens? And that's the kind of questioning that I started to kind of formulate to then help people and help my patients and help myself. And then when I started moving away from asking sickness questions and I started asking wellness questions, within a period of 8 months, I completely shifted my entire physiology and I got back to homeostasis and balance. Okay. And the information I'm going to share with you today, some of these tools on how to do that, hopefully you can take on board, because if you do and you ask the right questions, I guarantee you can reduce the stress load that's going to keep compiling so that you don't have to treat the problems after, but more, actually get to the source of the problem. This set me on a mission, I suppose, a mission to be able to share this information. So just like Natasha was saying, I've done a whole bunch of stuff. I've many a workshop. I've presented on TV, on radio, I've done TED Talks or TEDx Talks. I've written books, even though I can't write very well. I've had people to help me to do that. You always find a way, don't you? Something's passionate enough inside of you. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm not telling this to impress you, but I'm really telling this to impress on you the drive that I have to want to be able to give this information to you. Okay. But before I do, I need you to understand a little bit about stress and how it works and homeostasis. So who can tell me, like, first of all, who can tell me what stress is actually for? Like, why do we get stressed?
Situations.
Yeah, look, it's necessary in a life or death situation, definitely. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about how stress works in terms of when a stressful event is there and then your body getting back to balance, what we call homeostasis. So if I was to pick you up and to put you onto an iceberg, what would happen? Ain't it? Yeah, that's true. You'd be like, shit, I'm on an iceberg, right? But what else would happen to your physiology? Let's talk it through. What do you think?
Freeze, actually.
Yeah, so the first thing would happen, you start to shiver, right? You go, your nervous system starts to detect there's a change in environment. I'm getting really cold, okay? And your body starts to shiver. And then what will happen is your blood will start to pool from your extremities, like your feet and your hands, in order to start to protect your vital organs, right? Is this healthy or sick? Well, ask your big toe. It's probably sick if you're asking your big toe, but it's intelligent, right? It's very intelligent, because what your body is doing innately is actually giving you enough time to get off the freaking iceberg, right? It's buying you time. And that's really what I suppose homeostasis or balance is, because as soon as you start to move away from the stressful environment, you should actually start to normalize. The blood will start to re-pool. As long as the damage hasn't completely done and your foot's fallen off, you can go back to balance. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so stress is a very important thing in life or death situations. However, most of the situations we face today are not life or death. True? Right. So that actually leads me to this very important first question. Why do we trigger the stress response in situations that are not life-threatening? The answer is your perceptions of things. Okay. Now, let me go through this with you. If there's a tiger in front of you, you see this event or this thing, and you need to make a judgment or a perception around this tiger. Now, but in order for you to survive, you need to look at that and say, judge it, grow goods. Does that make sense? So that what that will do is it will start to elicit the stress response, the fight or flight response. Have we heard of that before? Yeah. And that fight or flight response will increase your blood pressure, right? So it starts to throw around hormones in your body. It'll increase clotting factors like cholesterol. So if the tiger cuts you, you don't just bleed out straight away. Yeah. Decreases your concentration, because you're not really caring about a maths equation when there's a freaking tiger in front of you. Yeah. You're looking for escape routes. So again, you're not focused on things very well. Your digestion doesn't start to work as well, because who cares what you ate for lunch if there's a freaking tiger in front of you? So when that situation is there in a life or death and you have 10 bads and 0 goods, you need it so that you can get away really quick. Okay, survival makes sense. As soon as you're away from the tiger, then the balance and the homeostasis of your body starts to kick in. The blood pressure should start to reduce, and then you get back to balance. Okay, does that make sense? Right. Let's say I put someone in front of you that you just don't like very much. And so what you will do is you'll start to make a perception of that person. And you might, let's say, score them 7 bads and 3 goods. Yes? And so you initially have a judgment around that person. Okay. Now, what that will do is it will start to create an emotion, won't it? And you start to feel uneasy, and you start to have a little bit of stress. This person really annoys me. Yes? We've all done this, right? Yeah. So if you think about the reason why that happens, first of all, in order for you to identify something that you don't like in someone else, it means that you have done that to someone else in some time of your life. You need to be able to have owned it to be able to see it in someone else, right? Think about that for a second. If you have that trait and you want to disown it because you feel shame or guilt around it, you will identify it as something bad in someone. Okay, and instantly that's why you have the judgment. Conversely, if there's someone in front of you that you see 7 goods and 3 bads, you become infatuated with. Yes? So what really we're doing is predator and prey right now. You want to move away from someone and you want to move towards someone. You want to consume them. You're infatuated with them. And what you'll tend to do then is you'll start to want to minimize yourself and change who you are because you fear the loss of that person. Making sense? Yeah, and we've all done this, right? We've done this maybe in our dating lives or something like that. Someone you're seeing and they're presenting in front of you and they're like, oh my God, this person is so wonderful. I can't see any bads. I can't see any negatives. And then days and weeks and months go by and all of a sudden the negatives start to come out and you take them from a pedestal and you put them on a pit, right? That's normal. That's we're like actually designed to do that. So how do we neutralize the emotional responses that you get from these situations that are non-life threatening? First step, reflective awareness. So let's go back. If there's a person in front of you that is just say giving you 7 bads and 3 goods and they're creating an emotional response, the first thing that I do, I go, Bryce, okay, think of a time where and when I've displayed that trait or action or inaction that I don't like and I've done it to someone else. And I go back in my mind and I teach this to my patients. I get them to do it as well. And they go back and I go, you own it, you're with it? And they go, yes, I can see it. Great. The first thing that does is it stops that judgment. It's very hard to judge someone straight away when you've actually owned that trait yourself. Fair? And so the emotional charge can actually start to neutralize just from that thing alone. And then when you work out, well, what are the benefits of this negative trait that I've presented? How can I see, like, did I have to get stronger from it? Did I have to change something or learn something new? And then you start stacking up the benefits. So all of a sudden, the 7 and 3 starts to become neutralized. And so you don't have the emotional charges anymore and the stress response is not initiated. Are you with me? This is powerful, isn't it? Like all of a sudden you have the ability not to get stressed over things. And yet no one's told you this before, I would imagine. They just teach you how to deal with the symptoms afterwards rather than actually address the problem beforehand. The second question. If you go back to our wilting plant, right? It has requirements, it needs things. So we need to know how to deal with like environments that we initially perceive as stressful by neutralizing. The second is, well, what do we put into our body, right? How can we fuel our body with things that are positive stress, which is called eustress, and how do we avoid things that are distressing to us. So let's think about this for a second. If I'm a panda, what does a panda eat? Bamboo, right. If I got 10 pandas, what do I feed 10 pandas? Okay, lots of bamboo, right? If I had koalas, what do koalas eat? Gum leaves, right. If I had 10 koalas, what do I feed them? Gum leaves, right. So there's not different diets for different pandas or koalas. Some of them might have more energy expenditure, so they might eat more. Some of them might, tend to want different types of gum leaves, but there's a genetically congruent diet for each animal species out there, okay? Remember, we're animals. And it so baffles me why all of a sudden we have like 400,000 different diets out there. To me, that makes no sense, right? Because there's a human diet, right? So who can tell me, or who can tell me first of all what the recommendations are that we should eat? Does anyone know at the moment? Not really. Everyone's confused. Hey, like you're a human animal and you don't even know what you should be eating. Like a panda would naturally know to just get bamboo. Yes. Proteins. Yeah. Yeah. So like here's the thing that really didn't make sense in my head when and I'm no nutritionist, and look, any advice or any information I give you today is just advice, okay? And I want you to go out and do your own research, and if you need help, go see an expert in that field, okay? I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just giving you the information around how it works and how I've helped many people over the years, all right? So the information we get given about nutrition is, I think it's called My Plate now, right? Where you have a plate, and in that plate, there's grains, which is, I think, one of the bigger components. There's vegetables, there's dairy, and there's meat, and then there's like oils as the smallest component. Does that sound about right? And so in my head, I'm like, okay, this is what we've been told to eat. So imagine if I got those grains and I smashed them up on a plate, and then I chopped up some vegetables and I sprinkled it on top, and then I got the dairy, which is the cheese, and I grated it and put it on top with a bit of the meat, and then I put a sauce on top of that. What have I just made? Put it in the oven, pull it out. Pizza, right? So does it make sense that you should eat a pizza 3 times a day to be well? And so when you put the logic into it, somehow something's not adding up. So really the human diet is pretty much anything you can smack over the head, kick from a tree, or pull from the ground. Okay? Processed foods, really, they don't come into it. And I'm not telling you what to eat, I'm just giving you information about how it works. Questions, thoughts, queries? No? As soon as you put in a food that's not genetically congruent, a part of the human diet, it's a stressor, it's a distress, okay? Think of it like this. If I had that panda and I fed it a mushroom, even if it's an organic mushroom, the best quality mushroom you can find, is it going to get healthier or sicker? Because it's not the right nutrient for that animal species. Do you see what I mean? It becomes, even though they could probably eat it and break it down and absorb some nutrients from it, it's going to be stressful and eventually lead to sickness and illness and disease. Okay. Is this information good? Yeah, cool. All right. Follow the human animal template, I suppose. This is how to reduce the chemical stresses in your life. So the first one was some of the emotional and mental stresses. This is some of the chemical stresses, what you're putting into your system. Hydration, water, so simple. How much water are you supposed to drink a day? Who can tell me? I don't know. Yeah, 2 litres kind of pops up as a general thing, but I'll give you a clue. It's just until your urine goes clear. Like, you don't have to overthink it. if it's really dark, then it probably means you're quite dehydrated, or you've got too much proteins trying to be broken down, or something's working harder than it should. So just drink enough water so your urine stays relatively clear. Simple stuff. And eat to live rather than live to eat. So what that means is that when we get stressed, right, and we live in our amygdala, which is the part of the brain which is the fight or flight stress response, we tend to look for quick solutions to get away from something, yes, to fill a void. And so planning the things that you do with the foods that you eat can be a very powerful tool. Like, for example, I wouldn't come and eat a massive meal before presenting to you right now, because all my brain's energy would be taken up trying to process all that stuff. And I'd be sluggish, and I probably wouldn't be as sharp, and you wouldn't get the best experience that you could get. So, you know, having that as a mindset, I think, is a very powerful tool as well. Question 3. Yes. Yep.
The criticism of the plate is proportions.
It's not necessarily about proportions. One of the biggest components is grains. And from my understanding and my research, and there's a lot of papers presented, especially by Lauren Condane. He wrote a paper called Grains, Humanity's Double-Edged Sword. What the issue is that we haven't really been able to break down grains. It's not part of our genetic ability. That's why we have to soak them and process them and do a whole bunch of stuff to them before we can actually ingest them. Like if you went and ate a whole bunch of grains raw, you'd get really sick. Yes, so you have to process them. So that's a pretty good clue in terms of nutritional stuff. And again, I'm not here to treat symptoms or tell you how to fix nutritional problems. Again, I'm just trying to give you the understanding. Whereas if I'm a bird, I can eat grains because it's genetically congruent and it wouldn't create a stressor in me. Does that make sense? Yeah. Question? Yeah, huge topic.
That we need to look at where it's not good. That's the mission that makes some money out of it. So we will be told cereals, because Kellogg's sort of say that cereals is one of the main things that we should eat, but actually
yeah, so look, to the best of my understanding, the original food pyramid, I think, was made by Sanitarium. So I think, so don't quote me on that one. But look, think of it like this. Do you see a bread tree? Is there a pasta bush? Okay, so, you know, just kind of think of things logically. Have that in the back of your mind. What is a human animal designed to do? And how can I supply the ingredients, like the wilting plant, right? What are the ingredients that we need to put into our bodies so that we can reduce the stress load, so that we don't end up having the problems and the issues that go along with sustaining the stress response? Remember the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol, the mental issues. Remember all that stuff we talked about under a stress load? Yeah, so you have the ability to do it. Right, question 3. What are the movement patterns that contribute to positive stress, eustress, how we can use it and adapt and get better? And what are the negative patterns that are stressful or distressing to your body? Again, let's go back to the basic premise. If I'm a kangaroo and I wanted to design an exercise or a movement program for that kangaroo, what would it involve? Hopping, yeah. You probably wouldn't want to get it to swim all day long, would you? Or if I'm a fish, you probably want to try and get it to walk, right? And so if you think about it logically for a second, every animal has a specific nutritional intake, movement pattern as well, yes? And so think about, what would a wild human do? Now think about what you do most of your day. Sitting. And so you can see where there's a disconnect. In fact, when you sit down for more than 20 minutes, what happens to your body? Start to twitch. Yeah, and so really what that is feedback. That's your brain and nervous system detecting that you're doing something that is distressful to you, and it's trying to give you feedback to tell you to get up and walk around and move, right? But what do we tend to do? We ignore it and keep on pushing through. Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm going to show you some stats here, and it's probably going to knock you off your chair when you actually see this. And this is based on people that that walk just for half an hour a day, right, versus people that do no walking at all. Okay, just let's go through this. So half an hour a day, normalize blood pressure and reduce risk of developing high blood pressure. Cool. Restore and maintain heart and blood vessel health. Restore and maintain normal cholesterol and triglyceride levels. Reduce breast cancer by up to 60% just from walking. Wilting plant needs water, right? Give it water, it's going to get well. Humans need walking. Give it walking, we're going to start to get well. Reduce the stress down. This was taken from a compile of evidence from the book, The Wellness and Prevention Paradigm. So if you want to look that up, then I strongly recommend going and checking out a lot of this stuff. It's very, very good information. Reduce pancreatic cancer in overweight people by 50%. Reduce lung cancer, even in smokers, by 72%. What like medication can do this? What supplement can do this? What gizmo or gadget can do this? So I suppose really what I'm trying to give to you is the tools, but also create the value around doing these things so you're actually more likely to want to start to do this stuff, right? Reduce melanoma, skin cancer, that's right, by 72%. Congestive heart disease by 63%. Hospital remissions from heart failure by 70%. Increased strength, balance and flexibility, gallbladder removal. And it just keeps on going on and on and on. Anti-tumor activity. Prevents up to 50% of colon cancer. 91% of cases of obesity and type 2 diabetes, 50% of all cases of heart disease, reduce stroke by 25-30%. And we go on and on and on and on. Okay, so enhances learning by 12 times. So that's pretty cool too, isn't it? If we're sitting down and we're powering down, we don't retain, right? Even now, you're getting to that point. It's probably been about 40 minutes. Yes, about 40 minutes. So you're at that point where some of the information's getting in, but it's just not as clear as what it was the first 10 minutes. Is that fair? Yeah. So maybe if you feel free, get up, stand up, move around, you're more than welcome. I don't care at all. You know, it's a free space. But if you move as you're trying to learn something, you'll retain more and you'll increase your productivity. Have we heard about this? I'm sure you have. Walking meetings. In fact, Steve Jobs was very famous for this. Some great philosophers were very famous for this type of stuff as well. But if you can structure your day around being more active and creating more movement, even though you're doing the same workload, you will be more productive, you'll be more creative, you'll retain more, and you'll have less stress in your system. So that means that general overload won't be there as much just by walking and moving. The other things that are requirements for a human animal is that once a week we've got to rev the engines. And what that means is if I'm a tiger and I have to run away from it, genetically we're wired up to have to do this occasionally to fire the right hormones and elicit the right kind of responses in your body and build muscle mass and all sorts of stuff. So once a week, rev the engines and do something at full exertion. It doesn't have to be for long. It could be for something like swimming as fast as you can until you can't. Right? What, 20 seconds, 30 seconds? It might be if you're running, you know, sprinting for as long until you can't. Riding a bike, something like that. Or there's a system called Tabata, which is pretty good, where you do 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. But it only has to be like once, maybe twice a week max. It's not all the time. You know, with stress and exercise and movement, doing too little is a stressor. Doing too much is a stressor. The nice balance in between, you have a balance where you can absorb the good stuff, but not have to adapt to the bad stuff. Okay? And you've got to lift something heavy once or twice a week. That's the requirements. Okay? However you do that, that's up to you. Okay? If you have an exercise thing that you love doing, great, keep doing it. You know, there's no right or wrong answers here. I'm just giving you the information about how to actually put this in your world. So I might have mentioned, or Natasha mentioned that I've written a couple of books and things like that. I actually did that on a treadmill. So I bought a crappy little treadmill off eBay. I put it in my office at home. I put the monitor, I put it on the wall, jiggied up a little desk, and on the lowest setting, I just walked and typed and dictated because I'm really bad at typing. But you come up with creative ways. Once you understand these concepts, it's a game changer, right? Because your body goes back to homeostasis. You're not like the iceberg trying to constantly have the symptoms and problems. All right, question 4. Which body system is responsible for controlling and regulating the stress response? Who can tell me?
Right.
Brain and nervous system. Absolutely. Yeah. And so this is how powerful your body is. Ready? If I get my arm like this and I brush my arm, what's happening is I'm removing skin cells. Okay. Now your brain and nervous system will detect that something has changed, and it will signal a whole bunch of proteins and genes and things to then make new skin cells pretty much from the food that you have for breakfast. That's freaking amazing that that system is running every single second of every day. There's billions of bits of information traveling back and forth, keeping you trying to keep the homeostasis or balance in your body. And so what? Yeah. The campus? Yep. As part of the... Yeah, which fits into the brain and the nervous system. Yeah, absolutely. Good answer, whoever that was. Thank you. Yeah, so the brain and the nervous system, it controls, it regulates. It's like the, let's say, the conductor of the orchestra. Kind of keeps the tempo, speeds things up or slows things down so that there's a nice sound in your body. Now, watch this. I'm going to explain to you kind of some of the challenges and the stresses that you get if you are just sitting down for long periods of time. You ready? Yeah, actually, you can explain it to me because it's pretty straightforward. What's that thing up the top? Right. Yes. This thing here. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's the spinal cord that connects to the brain. Yeah. And then what are all these things down this side here? Organs, right. And so how does the brain connect to the organs? The nerves, right. And so what protects the spinal cord? The spine, right? It's a suit of armor because it's so important in your body. Now, when you sit down for long periods of time, what will happen is some bones of your spine will start to jam and lock. You don't necessarily feel pain. Okay, but if you leave them there for a period of time, they can actually start to degenerate over time, like getting a cavity in a tooth almost. Okay, and if there's a blockage in your spine and there's compression, is the power going to run better or worse? Worse, yeah. Is your health and your stress levels going to be better or worse? Worse, right. And so have you ever met anyone who walks around like this and says, I feel fantastic. I love my life. I have heaps of energy, right? But unfortunately, what happens when you're sitting all day and you're not taking regular breaks and having regular movements, that's exactly what you're doing. You're increasing the stress response, but you're actually destroying your spine. Okay, so what can you do? Spinal hygiene every 30 minutes. So I'm going to do this with you. So let's stand up now. Those of you at the office on the computer, you guys can stand up too. I'm not seeing you, but I can imagine that you're going to do it with me. Okay, so the pattern is twist, twist, side, side, forward, back. Pretty simple. Okay, so we're just going to twist and then go back around the other way. So twist, twist, and then we go side, and then we go the other side. Good, and just don't headbutt people, but we're going to go forwards like this down towards our toes. And then we come back into extension and just support yourself. Don't go too far if you don't do this often. Feels good, right? And then we do our neck. So we twist, twist, side, side, forwards, and back. Okay, and instantly you feel a bit more energized, correct? Yeah, because what you've just done is you've moved every single bone of your spine through a full range of motion just by doing that simple movement pattern. Cool. The next thing is called the YWTLs, right? So this is to counteract this. All right, so we're going to go into a Y position. So your thumbs turn backwards into this Y. your chin is going to retract back, and then you squeeze your tummy muscles. Okay, from here, I want you to contract the shoulder blades and just squeeze and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. And then we go into a W position. Okay, same type of thing. Retract the chin, squeeze the tummy, and then contract the shoulders back for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good, into a T position. That's it. Try not to hit the person next to you. Retract the chin back, squeeze the tummy, and then pull this back for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax into a double L position. Good. Last one. Keep that chin pulled back, squeeze the tummy, pull these shoulders back for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Okay. Feels good, yeah? 20 seconds worth of work. That's it. And a little bit of movement. You can sit back down again if you like. If you want to stand up, please stand up. Doesn't matter to me. Hopefully I didn't show my undies doing that on screen. So the last thing too is that if you have been in a role where you have been sitting down for many years, it is likely that you probably are starting to develop some problems in your spine because, just like we said, if it's been loaded up for a long period of time, they do start to degenerate, and that can have a lot of problems, obviously, in the movement of your spine, but also the power that's running your body as well. So I really do encourage people to go get their spine and nervous system checked. Chiropractors are phenomenal at this. So if you have a chiropractor, go see one. If you don't, maybe book an appointment with one. They're really the best people to talk to in that field. Some of the spinal alignment programs that we run from time to time. This is a lady that she was only given about 6 months to live, actually, when I saw her. And I went through some of this protocol stuff that we talked about. And I'll give you exactly what we need to do this protocol on the next slide. But it took about 12 months, but you can see her body and her mind shifting so that she could actually start to heal and repair. It was a very powerful experience. I actually looked after this lady pro bono. She didn't have a lot of money, and she would just have nowhere else to go. And I said, "That's fine. Let's just do this, you know." And so I worked with her, and I helped her, and I gave her the tools to be able to do this herself, because I don't want people to become reliant on me. I want you guys to be empowered, so that you have the tools to do this stuff yourself. Okay, it might go back to some of the bullying that I got as a kid because I was overweight, having this void that I need to fill to empower other people. Maybe it's from that, I don't know, but I really love doing that. So how do we do it? What are the realignment protocols so that you reduce the stress, improve your health, and really can restructure your life to take it to however you want to take it? The first thing is to identify your core values. Probably thinking, what the hell does that mean? And so the reason we do step 1 and 2, identifying core values and then structuring your life around your core values, is because each single person in this room, in the online world, wherever you meet, doesn't matter what color skin they have, doesn't matter what age they are, we all have a set of values or a set of priorities, the way that we believe our life should run. Okay, and the world works. And these values are developed pretty much from the voids that you're trying to fill throughout your life. Okay, and when you're living in a world where you can fulfill these values and voids, you move your blood glucose and oxygen away from the amygdala, which is the primitive fight or flight brain, into the executive center, which is there for reasoning and poise and purposefulness and controlling. And so you stop seeing black and white, good or bad, and you start seeing gray. You make better decisions. Automatically, you're not fueling the stress response, you're fueling the homeostasis and balance part of your body. Make sense? You can't have a de-stressed life if you're doing low priority things all the time. Think about this for a second. In your day, when you can do the high priority things, right, you feel good. It's like you've knocked it out of the park, you go home, you're probably more engaged with your spouse or partner, or, you know, you might want to do some exercise, you feel more energized. Is that right? But if you're stuck in a day where you're putting out fires, doing low priority things all the time, you frustrate, you hesitate, you procrastinate, you go home, you're grouchy. Yes, you project your like moods onto other people. Sound right? Yes. So the first thing we need to do is figure out who you are and then start to structure your life around supporting who you are and what you actually want to achieve. Because that's the first step to be able to then do the rest of it. Because I can tell you this information, but you probably won't go and do it unless you see the value in it. True? The third thing is that we start to learn about these nutritional and movement patterns and kind of look at like where you actually are in terms of your nutrition, where the human template is, and just figure out how to slowly move it from there to there. Okay? It's not about treating the symptoms. It's not about like fixing problems. It's just about watering the plant. Yes? And the other key thing is that we start to link that to your value structure. So in other words, if you don't see the value in something, you won't do it. I can't force you to do anything. Who here has said, I'm going to go exercise, I'm going to set my alarm at 6 a.m. in the morning, the alarm goes off and you push snooze? Yes? Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have at some stage. Or, you know, like, let's think about it. Who says, oh, look, I'm going to give up chocolate or I'm going to give up something really, really good that I like, yeah? And then a stressful day comes along and you're like, oh, there's some chocolate there, but I shouldn't eat it, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to eat the chocolate. Yeah, we've done that too, right? Because the belief around it and the value is not quite there yet. So you link it to your primary purpose, and you'll see how you can actually engage in these things. It becomes easy for behavior change rather than trying to be pushed and motivated. You're inspired rather than motivated to do these things. We start a spinal nervous system realignment program if it's needed. So physically find the bones that get stuck, make them move, do it enough times over a period of time so the brain starts to see it as normal again. So you stand back upright and your brain is talking to your body well and your spine is becoming healthier. And we start practicing balancing the emotional charges in people, things, and events. So like some of that information that I gave you before about how to neutralize the stress response so you don't have these judgments. And then you slowly add more and more and more good stresses, and you slowly, eventually, as the final step, remove the bads out of your life, okay? Because you don't really want to do them anymore as much. That's kind of the process or the protocol or the formula, okay? And you can do this, okay? You can do this if you're inspired. You can, the first thing I would really suggest you do is look at your core values. What does your life demonstrate right now? Not what you think it wants to be or should be or ought to be or has to be or must be, but what is it that you do the most of? Where are you most dedicated in? Where do you always find time and money for? Where are you most reliable in? They're really good indicators of really what your core values represent. It could be raising a beautiful family. It could be making a financial gain. It could be a social influence. It could be an intellectual quest. I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. But start to identify that and own it. And then start to see how the things that you're doing become on the way rather than in the way. Okay, that's the very first step. If you do that, it will change the trajectory of your life, I promise you. Okay, we have a little bit of time for questions. I think we've got a couple of minutes. Yes, shoot.
Thanks, Bryce. That was really interesting.
Oh, thank you.
Just on nutrition, I'm wondering what your stance is on breakfast. I keep hearing increasingly that it's not really that necessary and you can actually think a bit more clearly and concisely if you continue that fast from sleep. Just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, good question. So there is definitely more information around intermittent fasting and how that can sometimes help your body. Look, I think each person is going to relate differently to that type of eating pattern depending on their physiology at the time. So a lot of the time when we just cut out things, if we're ingrained into constantly burning sugars as our primary fuel, you'll like sink very quickly. If your predominant nutritional source is fats and proteins already, then you'll be able to sustain that a lot longer and you'll burn ketones, which means your brain will actually run better. So you'll probably have more energy and you'll probably be able to think clearer. So my answer is it depends on where you currently are to whether or not it's probably going to help you. Yeah,
Thanks.
that's right. Yes, next question.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Curious about your thinking. Stress, what's your thinking?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Look, the first thing is I don't see anything as good or bad in terms of supplements or remedies. And so they all have a place, I think, in treating the effects, definitely, but they're not really getting to the cause. That's kind of where my mindset is with a lot of this stuff, because the cause, again, is the ingredients that you're missing out on a genetic level, emotionally, nutritionally, movement-wise, environmentally, that type of stuff. Yeah, that's right. That's the core. That's the core ingredients, you know. And so, as I said, there's always times and places for those things. But if you're using them but not providing yourself with the right ingredients generally, then you're still going to have more and more symptoms, which are just feedback of your body to tell you that you're out of balance, you're out of alignment. That's really what happens. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Yep. On the what, sorry? Nutrition. Yep. Okay, so I think the question was, what's your stance on processed food? Is that right? Or
whether you process food and not processed food.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so first of all, let's answer that question. So there's different levels of processing stuff, right? And so, I mean, you can have foods nowadays that are like frankenfoods, where there's very little nutritional value in them. So the first thing to do, if you're wondering whether or not it has nutritional value, when you're in the supermarket, if you kind of go on the outside rim of the supermarket, you've got a better chance of getting something with nutritional value. The further in you go, the less nutritional value things tend to have. Interesting, isn't it? So that's the first step I would take. But in terms of like what is processed, anything that you can't eat raw or naturally that has to have some kind of procedure to it is a processed step, which means that your body has less chance of being able to absorb that thing. Here's a great example. If I get a potato and I eat a potato raw, I get a bit unwell, right? But I can eat a sweet potato raw. Interesting, isn't it? So you have to process the potato. You've got to do something to it to then consume it, because you remove some anti-nutrients and other things enough so that your body can actually tolerate it. Good question. And again, we can go really deep on this stuff. And some of the workshops and seminars that I do, we go into a lot of this big stuff, but we don't have a lot of time to go into the super details. But great question. Okay, any other questions? No? Did we get some value out of this today? Okay, did you learn something that you might not have ever learned if you didn't come to this session? Good, and it gave you some fuel and some food to think about, hey? And so hopefully this will help you on your journey to start to see things maybe from a potentially different paradigm, and look at solving some of the causes rather than treating the symptoms and the effects. Okay. Thank you. If there's no more questions, and I think that probably wraps it up. Any online?
Oh, sorry.
Yep, sure.
Someone wrote, what are your thoughts on high intensity training, please?
So, like I was saying before, revving the engines and high intensity training is I think a requirement. However, what we tend to do, and I've done CrossFit and I've done a lot of stuff like that over time as well. But if we're doing too much of it and we're not recovering well enough, then that's a stressor, and that's going to break down things in your body. Okay, rather than having a stressor where it's an exercise, giving you enough time to recover and then adapting and getting stronger from. So yes, I think they're great. However, if we do them every day, repeatedly, or 2 or 3 times a day, it's going to create some problems long term. Yeah. Good question.
Question, Matt. What is your thoughts about sleep? Because some people say you should sleep minimum 8 hours, some say 6. And some say that it depends on person to person, but how does that person really
Yeah, another great question. Look, I feel like, and this is going from clinical experience as well, I feel like different people are going to be able to run well on different amounts of sleep. I've just noticed that throughout the years. In fact, there's a lot of people I know that run really well on 4 hours sleep. Okay. And there's other people that are like, I need my 8 hours. Otherwise, I'm just the grumpiest, what in the planet. What I tend to find is that the people that are more focused on really fulfilling their purpose and their goals in life tend to require less sleep. And I think that has to do with the way that the mechanisms and the systems in the body are processing and generating, and the way that you're fueling your mind and the energy levels that you tend to have. Okay. So I think the answer is there's no set rule. I think whatever's going to be good for you, and what's going to be good for you in a deep sleep environment, don't try and fit into a box, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. Yep.
Another question online.
Okay.
Exercising in the morning versus exercising in the evening.
Yep.
Are there any differences in terms of benefits?
I think if you exercise in the evening, you're probably less likely to sleep well, I would suggest. I think exercising in the morning can then definitely set the tone of your day. However, just exercising, like just moving, I think is really the key. I think if you're worried about good or bad, I think you're missing the point a little bit. I think it's just do what you need to do to keep moving is really the key. Whatever you feel like doing and you can sustain, do that. Yeah. Good. Okay. Look, if anyone else wants to reach out, you can do so. I'm sure I'll send through emails or something, or some connection way that you can connect with me or ask any other questions. I'll be more than happy to help as best I can. And I love obviously working with groups like you. And yeah, so thank you for having me, and thank you, enjoy the Wellness Week.